Sometimes life goes a little off course. That's why you need a podcast host that can go a little off topic. This is the podcast that will give you straight talk about everything life throws at you. Welcome to another episode of Off Topic with Tom Powell. And here he is. This is Tom Powell.
Here we go. Now I'm on. I can see.
How are you doing?
I don't know. I mean, I'm 56. I shouldn't know how to work any of this. I don't even know how the hell I made it on here, but I'm happy to be here, Tom.
I'm happy that you're here, man. I love your content.
And like right back at you. I've been watching you, I believe, since before I even started posting.
Really?
Yeah, I think you were one of the first people I started to follow.
Well, I do appreciate that. I won't take up too much of your time. This is going to take about an hour, roughly. And just so that you know what I do here, I do it over Zoom so that I can capture the audio very nicely and upload it to my podcast. Okay. And it's really not a political thing. I know that you watch me, you know I do a lot of politics. It's on this podcast, I talk about what goes on in people's lives and what they got going on.
I love it.
And you're doing something that I've got a little bit of experience in, as you probably know if you've been following me for any period of time. So yeah, I want to talk to you about what it is that life is like for you, if that's okay.
That is fine, Tom. And it's a good time to do that because everything changed in the last 2 months. As you know, I was doing this halftime and then my brother got some health issues. And then my dad and I fell. And ever since that, I've been doing it full time. So I think I'm more prepared to talk now than even.
Well, first of all, I hope you're feeling better.
Much better, Tom. Thank you. And you too.
Yes. Yeah. I got good news yesterday. So.
Oh, great.
With the PSA levels dropping, it was a very good phone call. And we're ruling out some things with my daughter. So. I know that you have college age kids as well. And, you know, when she is an hour away at school and she calls you and says, I've been passing out. You know, you're like, what do you mean you passed out? She goes, well, I left class and I passed out in the hall.
Yeah.
It makes you nervous as a dad. Makes you nervous.
And all of that makes you, I mean, anything. When you're a dad, you know, my daughter called, my car broke down on the highway in LA and I'm in a panic for 4 hours. And yeah, to get a call, I'm passing out that I have a son who has issues as well. So there's nothing, it dwarfs taking care of parents. I mean, it is, when it's your kid, it's everything. It's your life. You know, it is.
It kicks something on in your brain that you've never had before you had kids.
It is absolutely true. There's to say about the innate nature and the innate feelings that attach to your children and that leads to the survival of the species. That's why we get that way, Tom.
Doesn't mean that they don't piss you off.
They do piss you off, but you love them anyway.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. So where I would like to start is I've gone back through a lot of your videos and I maybe I'm missing it or something, but can you explain what it is your dad has?
Okay. So my dad has, there's you can define dementia broadly, and that dementia is a broad term that covers all the different kinds of dementia, whether they be Alzheimer's or Lewy body, you know, frontal lobe, traumatic brain injury, or just old age and just, you know, brain deterioration. All those things can cause dementia. As far as my dad is concerned, we've never had him officially diagnosed as to, you know, what stage he's in or what kind of dementia he has, although we believe with the 90+% confidence level that it's vascular dementia in my dad's case. And so we're treating him medically for vascular dementia, which is basically the same stuff he's taken for his heart anyway, you know, keep the veins and arteries clear and prevent. Vascular dementia is basically tiny strokes taking place in your head because, you know, the blood vessels get constricted or there's some kind of blockage and you have a small stroke that causes some brain damage. and increases the dementia. Whatever area of the brain it is gets hit. So the longer we can keep him stable and minimize the number of strokes, the longer he'll maintain his current position. So we believe that based on his histories, the rest of his medical history. So that's where we are, and he's probably in a moderately advanced stage of vascular dementia, but we haven't, the doctors feel it's, he would not be able to sit through the testing, the mental testing to do it. He's not suitable for that. So we're just treating him based on, what we believe he has. And we're fairly confident that's what he has.
And does that come with any other effects other than the memory loss?
It does. It can affect other areas in addition to memory, depending on where the minor strokes take place in the brain. We are fortunate that my dad still has what I'll call his CPU. When I'll make a computer analogy. So the memory is, you can have a hard drive, you can have random access memory, and you have a CPU that runs it all, right? So his CPU, I think, is affected, but not as much. It is affected. Maybe he's working at 75%. But his hard drive memory, the stuff that's imprinted on him, is probably affected 75%, but his random access memory, his short-term memory, 99% gone.
Yeah. How far back does he? Because he knows you guys, he knows his career, he knows he was married, he knows your brother, but it seems like the common thread is he wakes up and he's like, why am I here?
He wakes up every morning. He doesn't know where he is. I mean, he wakes up. Imagine that. You wake up, you're in a bed, and you don't know whether you're in your own home. You don't know whether you are in somebody else's home, in a hospital, in an old folks home. He wakes up. He doesn't even know what city he's in. Yet he wakes up with a smile on his face. I do believe that he recognizes my face. Whether he knows I'm his son, which he does most of the time, sometimes he doesn't. He knows that I'm connected. He knows that I'm safe. He knows that I'm family. That, fortunately, has been kind of the ticket that gets us through all the moments, because he's never so terrified that, he breaks down or shuts down. I'm always able to talk him through it, because there's some kind of underlying trust that's still there. And as long as that bond's there, I'll be able to get through all the difficult times. When that starts to break down or disappears, or he looks at me and sees horror or terror, like, who is this guy? Am I a danger? That will be a much more difficult period. But thus far, we've been extremely fortunate that, while he's experiencing all these deficits, he hasn't reached the point where he's lost trust. And so we're able to get him through.
I hate to even make the analogy, but when I watch it, and I know that this is not the same thing, but when I watch it, what it reminds me of is the movie 50 First Dates.
A lot of people say that.
Where it's a I know who you guys are, but I need to be reminded of why I'm here, what's going on. And yeah, you're right. I can't imagine waking up every day knowing the parts of my life that are huge, but not knowing how I got. Listen, I've gone on a handful of benders in my youth and woken up not knowing where I was. But to have that happen every day has got to be, it's got to be traumatic at times.
Yeah. And at least, when you're off a bender, the cause, right?
Yeah.
And the problem with my dad sometimes is he is a doctor. And like you said, that hard memory stuff is hardwired on him. And he doesn't forget, like how to speak. He doesn't forget, his medical backing. So when he wakes up, one of the very first things I say, and I probably should make a video and let my viewers know, but, some people ask, I'll get to the 51st Dates thing in a second, but some people ask, why do you keep telling him he's 91? Why do you keep telling him that? He's always surprised. They like seeing it, but they're asking if he thinks he's young. And the reason I do that is because my dad knows that he has debt. When he wakes up, he can't remember. He knows there's a deficit. And in his doctor's mind, he's thinking, geez, what do I have? How bad is it? Did I have a traumatic brain injury? Did I have a stroke? Did I have, some kind of trauma? So I always try and bring him down, ease his mind by explaining, no, Dad, you're just old. you're old, and I use it, you're 91 and you've reached this point in life, and these deficits that you're experiencing are normal for your age. And that's to kind of help him, to help the doctor, the scientific part of him, and kind of ease his mind. You're not, there's nothing immediately acute. You're not having a stroke. This is just old age. And that seems to work and calm him down. On the 51st states analogy, it's close. And I see why people bring it up, and why don't you make a movie? But the difference between my dad and 51st states is she would wake up with no short-term memory. I mean, Drew. And she would watch the movie at the beginning, and it would fill her in, and she would retain that information until she went to sleep. With my dad, his memory literally can reset in a matter of seconds. So, and especially when he's flustered. And when he's not flustered, you're not thinking about it. You just go about your day. But when he's flustered, it would be a situation he'd have to watch a 5-minute movie explaining it, and his memory might reset during that very movie. So it would be, it's not possible to use that kind of tool, on a daily basis, and that wouldn't really solve a whole lot. It might solve the problem for 5 minutes if his memory didn't reset, or 10 minutes. But he'd be continuously watching the movie, and it wouldn't work for us. But I can see why people make that analogy and see that and always have that suggestion. But I wish that he were that way. I wish he had a day's worth of memory. My life would be a lot easier. But unfortunately, that's not the way dementia works in real life.
A lot of people, when they hear dementia and they see somebody advanced in age that doesn't remember where they're at, doesn't know where they're at, they think about the images and the stories of people getting violent. And you said that he never breaks down. Does he ever get to the point where he is like frantic, almost violent?
Never. My dad is not, and has never been, a violent person. The only time that my dad would get physical is if, like, I initiated it. Like, sometimes he will get stubborn, and the one area that is really difficult is when he's in a dangerous situation. Like, he's standing at the door, and there's a step to go into the garage, and then another step after it. And I will come up, and I will physically grab his shirt at that point and, pull him back to make sure. That pisses him off. And, he would respond to me being physical, but never, ever on his own. He is such a sweet, gentle creature. He's not always been sweet, but he's always been gentle. Okay. Believe me, if people saw my dad 30 years ago, they look, wow, that's Ed. But he's always had that gentleness about him, and he's never been a violent man. So we are really lucky in that. And not only does he not get violent, but he never gets, so angry to the point where he's attacking. I do see it on TikTok, and I think to myself, those poor caregivers, because my dad, unlike, someone who's getting violent, he's the opposite. He is grateful for everything. When I'm giving my dad a shower, and which I do every other day, I swear to God, it's 15 times during the course of giving him a shower, he says to me, "Thanks for helping, Dan. You're a good son. You're a good son. Thank you." And to the point where I'm just like, "Dad, I know. Thank you. I get it. Don't worry about it." He's that persistent with his praise. He knows that he's getting help, and he is definitely grateful, and he expresses that every day. That's the opposite of what I see with some caregivers, and my heart goes out to them. Like, I couldn't imagine when the effort that you put into caregiving, and even though it's the disease, it's still, those words still hurt. I see it in when I watch those TikToks. I'm not going to name names, but I watch the response, and my heart, they really get me, because I am so fortunate that my dad is nonviolent, he's polite, and he's grateful for everything. So it makes it even more difficult for the times when we're impatient, right?
Yeah.
Tom, I mean, there's literally times when it would look so bad on a video, but I'm doing something in the kitchen, okay, maybe cooking his dinner or making something, and and he gets anxious about dinner time where he's waiting. And again, we keep him out of the kitchen because we have animals. There's food dishes, there's carpets, all sorts of dangers for him to navigate. The way he shuffles and doesn't pick his feet up, he catches it on the carpet. And since there's counters there, if he falls, he's at risk of, banging his head on the counter. So it's like we have a no kitchen rule. And my dad, being my dad, just like I would be, always wants to flaunt every, if he knows there's a rule, he wants to flaunt. I'm not going to fall. He doesn't, we tell him, why are you out, Dad? Because it's dangerous. That's not dangerous for me. And, he'll walk in there to prove us wrong. So, and there are times when we're cooking dinner, he'll get up and he just wants to help. He wants to come over and help, or we're moving something and he wants to help. And when he gets in that mindset, it'll be every 10 seconds. So imagine this, the man gets up, Dan, is there anything I can do to help? Dan, I want to help. I'd love to help you. And, 4 or 5 times, Dad, no, just sit down. The easiest thing you can do is sit down. Oh, I'd love to help you. I'd love to help you. And finally it's like, Dad, sit down. I'm yelling at him in response to his continuous offers to help. And then, you're feeling, God damn, I have to be that way. And the man just wants to help. But, every 30 seconds when you're trying to get something done, you can't help it. You can't help it. It's like, Dad, you want to help, sit down. And that's not what he wants to hear. Yeah. He wants to be participant. He wants to actively assist and help because that's his nature. So, for me, it's the opposite. I'm not worried about him getting mean or nasty or violent. I'm more worried he's overly wanting to help and being nice. And so makes it more difficult for me to say, no, Dad, sit down. Let me finish your dinner.
Yeah. With my father, the arguing was the hardest part because my dad wasn't this sweet, cuddly old man. I know this is going to sound hard to believe that my father would be a little rough around the edges, but to say he was rough around the edges would be an insult to smooth edge things everywhere or rough edge things everywhere. And so we would argue. He never had the memory loss. He had the physical breakdown. And with the physical breakdown came limitations that he didn't want to do, that he didn't want to accept, and things he had to do that he didn't want to do. He didn't want to accept the fact that it was getting to the point where he couldn't drive anymore. Not because he didn't know where he was, but because he just physically couldn't do it anymore. And then with some of the things that happened to him, my wife was taking him. Luckily, I was 4 houses away with my landscape crew working, and my wife was taking him to a doctor's visit, and he was stepping out. We have 1 step out the front door, and then it's a ramp walkway down to the driveway. He was taking that 1 step out the front door. He lost his balance. He fell back into the house, but his leg never came out from under. So he ripped his knee open, coming backwards. They took him in for surgery, and it was at that point in time that they had realized that he had no circulation below the knees. And he sat in a nursing home rehabilitation center for a short period of time, and he developed sores on his feet. And that's when they told him, we have to amputate because you're not going to get enough blood flow down there. And
he was diabetic.
He was a diabetic. He had a lot. So he had, my father had a heart attack and 3 strokes. He was on his 2nd pacemaker when he died. He was an insulin dependent diabetic. He had to do his own dialysis here 5 times a day. He was on salt and liquid intake restrictions. He had prostate cancer that he had treatment for. He had cancer on 1 kidney. They removed it. Then they found cancer on the other kidney and they froze it. Basically everything that you could So it all kicked off. He was in his 40s and he had a gallstone blow out like 1/3 of his pancreas. And he wound up having the Whipple surgery. I'm sure as having a father in the medical industry, you've heard of the Whipple surgery. And so it just kicked off this series of shit going wrong with him that lasted for decades. He was on every pill known to man. And when he was trying to, before the knee incident, he had another incident that he was trying to rebound from, and he had to do home physical therapy. And it was, look, I know it's easy for me to look at it and say it was simple. They put a little bicycle thing on the table and you do this with your arms. You stand at the counter and you lift your legs sideways 5 times, doing 3 sets. He didn't do it. He wouldn't do it. And I found out that it wasn't because he didn't want to. He physically couldn't do it, but he didn't know how to tell me I can't do it. So he would just tell me, I don't want to do that. I'm not doing that. And so then him and I would argue because I would get pissed off that he wasn't doing what he needed to do to take care of himself. Because if he had to go into a nursing home with my wife and I both working, me owning my own business at the time, that needed my daily presence, there would be nobody here to take care of him. And I didn't want that. And so I would argue with him, and I would get loud and I would get boisterous. I'd be like, I'd stop my hands. I'd be like, God damn it, it's my responsibility to keep you moving. Get the fuck up and do your therapy. And he would go, God, and then he would bark back instead of just saying, I can't physically do it, man. And so the arguments were some of the hardest parts because that's not how I wanted to end, and unfortunately, that's how the last year went. He never got violent, but he would get angry and he would push back and he would scream and yell, God damn it, I'm the father. You're the son. And you're telling me what to do. And I would tell him, because it's my turn. It's my turn to take care of you. And you ain't fucking listening. I just hope that you guys don't have to go through that because your dad is such a nice man. I can see it.
That is, now remember, my dad is nice and sweet now. That has not always been his history. But what you're pointing out, and whether even with or without dementia, when you're caring for somebody, it's not a normal. You're not a caregiver by trade. You don't go home at the end of the day. You're first and foremost, you're still father and son. And that dynamic plays out with me all the time, even though, I'm responsible for his care and he can't function on his own. We still have a 56-year-old dynamic where he's been, my guardian, my caretaker. And when you reverse that you can't escape the family dynamics that existed before, and they definitely overlap, and they flow into your care. And I get it, and that I struggled with that the first year that I had him. I tried to deal, and we were a very loud family, Tom. I mean, when my dad could give it, you can can imagine, I can give it, he can give it back. And if you watch some of the early videos before he declined even more, you watch him give it back as good as I give it to him. And that was our dynamic. We were loud, we were outspoken, we didn't hold things in as a family. And that's kind of the way I, was trying to care for him the first year. And it just took a lot of, trial and error and, situations going bad before I realized, I can't, he's my father, but I can't treat him like my father. I have to treat him. I have to kind of, take a step back and deal with him like that. And that is so hard because you can do that consciously, but you still float back into your old self and your old, the relationship that you've had all those years. And if that included, arguing, it's hard to get away from that, even in the end stages where they're physically and mentally not there. You still have all that baggage, and I do deal with that, just not a little differently than you're describing so far. Who knows where he's going to progress to, but I totally understand what you're saying, and I was getting a chuckle when you were saying I'm arguing, because that's how we started. I mean, you can't drive, Dad, and I'm yelling at him and I'm trying to convince him, with logic and the way I used to 20 years ago, why you can't drive. But logic doesn't apply. Common sense doesn't apply in these situations. And it's not just the dementia, sometimes it's the person's personality and the fact that they don't want to be in decline. So they shut out reality in order as a defense mechanism. And that's one of the things we're forced to deal with.
So we're going to talk about the family dimension in just a second. I remember some of the earliest videos I saw of yours, my wife and I watching, Renee and I watching them, because we are a loud family. We are a give each other shit kind of family. My father's hillbilly, my mother's Sicilian, my wife comes from a west side of Chicago. Polish people, and we're it's just this meld of people who will give each other shit. We're loud and we're boisterous. And I remember going through the comment section of some of your videos where people were going, "How could you yell at him like that? How?" No, he's not. And my wife's going, "That's not yelling. That's how we talked with your dad before we would argue with him. That's just the way shit is." And we could we were like from a distance sympathizing with what you guys were going through, listening to, or reading some of these comments by people just not understanding how the dimension is. But speaking of the dimension, you're talking about the whole family dynamic of it, and I'm talking about how it affected me, and you're talking about how it affected you. My wife was very much affected by my father coming to live with us for those 4 years. What was the conversation like? Your wife is listen. I've never seen anybody like your wife before. I'll come in the office here in the morning. I'll start doing things. And then, your brain needs to get away from the computer. I'll flip on TikTok and I'll be scrolling through. And there she is. She's in the garage and she's having a full-blown conversation. I'm like, this woman's got more energy than I've ever possessed in my life. What was it like having that conversation? Hey, Dad's got to come live with us.
Okay, so I'll tell you how that happened. And it was extremely difficult at first, Tom, but by way of just a little bit of history. So my dad's had dementia. We knew he had dementia, even when he was living by himself. And Mark and I we would take turn. One of us would pick him up at lunchtime. Oftentimes we'd all meet for lunch or that person. And then Mark or I would bring him home to stay with us with one of his kids for the afternoon, and then bring him back to his house where he was all alone, and he'd have a healthy choice dinner and a salad, the same dinner every night. And he lived like that for a couple of years. So there's a couple of years where we knew someone had to be there every single day. So that was the 2 years going into it. And this is about just before COVID, right? He moved in with me the year of COVID. So, and then one day I think Mark picked him up, and he's doing this with his arm, and we looked under, there's a bruise, and he didn't know how he got it. And there have been some incidents before with the heat, it was like super hot and he's refusing to put on the air conditioning. And I'm worried that he's going to pass out and die of, heat exhaustion in the middle of the night when it's 115 in Sacramento. And he doesn't want to put on the air conditioning because in his mind, that's he doesn't own PG&E. So, those kind of things had happened. And then the fall was the last step. And during that preceding 2 years, Mark was married, and we'd bring him back, like I said, to one of our houses, and he would bring my dad back to his house with his wife. And that was actually the final straw that caught, they weren't real strong, but that ended up causing them to get a divorce. It was the final straw. I think, the woman said, "Look, your dad can't come here anymore." It's just because he'd walk in on her when she was working and, ask her a question. It was difficult, and that was it for Mark. He said, "Look, it's between you and my dad, bye." And so she was gone, and that was before he moved in. And then after the fall that day, we decided he would move into Mark's house. He was living not too far, and he lived with Mark by himself for about 5 or 6 months. And, I could see Mark getting, more and more angry. I didn't know anything about dementia care at this point, right? Even while Mark had him, I was oblivious to just how freaking hard it is and how overwhelming it can be and all encompassing in your life. I mean, it takes over your life. And so he had stayed there for 5 months, and he was getting a little stipend, and the family was all happy. Mark's taking care of it. And then Mark was going, nuts. It was driving him nuts. And he took a vacation to my sister, who lived on the East Coast at that time. And so Danielle and I took my dad in for a week. And during that week, we realized, together in this bigger house with two of us, and we had a kid or two living at the time, it was still almost impossible for us to do it for that week. And that's when I realized Mark can't do it anymore by himself. There's no way. So we started the switch, and we did the switch for about 2 years where my dad was going back and forth. Okay. And that's how that happened. And then after that week, I had to have that conversation with Danielle, the conversation you were talking about, saying, "Danielle, you see how hard it is. He's either going to end up in a home, or we're going to have to give Mark a break." And She was reluctant, but not, she didn't poo-poo it. She said, all right, we'll do it. I know it's important to you, and we'll do it. And we started, and it was worse than I thought. Even the half time, it was hard. And Tom, it was also during that period we were dealing with COVID, and then Andrew got sick. He had AIG with his kidneys, and we were dealing with what was, as when it's your kid, it's everything, right? I mean, it just trumps everything. And it was really bad with Andrew at the beginning. His numbers were like, he should be in the ER type numbers, and it was really scary. So for that first month and a half, it was really hard. And there was, I remember a day when Danielle got in her car and just drove. She was crying. She just left because I'm fighting with my dad, like, cause we were back in the, the beginning stages. I didn't know how to deal with them. I'm fighting with Danielle. We're all upset about Andrew. And it became so overwhelming that it almost, I almost that night had to think, I can't let this break up my marriage. And, I can't let it tear my family apart. So it was very tenuous. It was very difficult in the beginning. And then, and I'll get into the better part of the story. Slowly, Danielle, we started to learn a little bit, how to grasp. And she was really good in dealing, in going through this. Remember, there was no social media benefit at this point. We weren't even on social media. So it was just our family and our family dynamic. And I had my heart attack. I was not working. So we weren't making the money that I was making when I was working. All of this came together at once. And I was dealing with my health issues. I was trying to walk and eat healthy and change my lifestyle so that I could survive and not orphan them like I almost did with my heart attack. So it was incredibly hard at the beginning. And then I started posting on social media, I didn't even post my dad for the first, unless you happen to be there. I posted a couple of videos of him, nothing blew up. And then we had the one viral video. It was the car video, Tom, where, it's like I walked out and I just blew up. I blew up. My dad's in the car, in my car, trying to, it was a push button, but he had a key and he's trying to drive away in my car. And I went out and my dad, what the fuck are you doing? Where the fuck are you? And I'm swearing because I'm just at wit's end. And my dad gives it back. Well, I'm fucking going here. You can see it was really, he gives it right back to me, throws my language right back at me. But that video posted, and then there was the negativity like you couldn't believe. I mean, how can you treat him like, blah, 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 blah. And my family was my I think it was like right over Thanksgiving or something. All my kids were here and they're reading the comments, and they come and get at me. But you got to take that down right now. People are this, that, and the other thing. And I went and I looked because again, I wasn't, I didn't have 1 million followers at that point. Right. And this video is starting to go viral, and it's getting, instead of 10 comments on a video, now there's, hundreds or thousands of comments that are appearing on videos. And I'm going through them, and I looked at it, and I everyone's telling me I got to take the video down. And I said, you know what? I looked at the video. That's life. That's real. I'm not taking that down. I don't give a shit if the world thinks I'm in this. There are other people out there that are doing this that get it. And you could see, sprinkles of the comments of the people that did it. And then the caregivers were coming out and showing support. There were 90% negative comments at the beginning. And it almost, everyone was bugging me to shut it down. And I said, no, I'm not going to shut it down. Now I'm going to show the world what this really is like. And that's kind of how that's how the whole channel blew up. It went from my poetry and our little skits, that I would do, or little fun things during quarantine, to my dad. And then of course the channel started blowing up. And I do have a point that I'm getting to, Tom. I know you're going, where the hell is he going? But with Danielle, so we started accumulating followers and more followers. And then I think I had an issue with TikTok or whatever. I changed phones and I couldn't get on. So I encouraged Danielle, why don't you make an account and we can, you can be a backup for me. You can have it. And so she made her account, and guess what? She put my dad on and her account grew, right? And then people started to know her and respond to her. Like you said, that treadmill thing in the morning didn't take a lot, masses amount of people, but she started to get positive feedback from social media. And it was a really timely and really helpful, and it helped us get over the hump. And it wasn't like it wasn't like it was today, but it was just enough feedback where she started to get some kind of positivity back. We also had the negative things, and believe it or not, we did learn a lot from some of the negative comments in the beginning. Some of the suggestions that we hadn't thought of, we were able to employ those, and we slowly got better at dealing with him. And then the comments, and it just started to shift, and people started to see more our side, the caregiver side, and how tough it is. And of course, my dad, being the way he is on the videos, he's 1 in a million, or I'd say a billion, given TikTok's numbers. He's 1 in a billion, and it just kind of grew from there. So she has now gotten back from my dad in the form of all this, social media attention, and the new friendships, and the new, just she's developed her own sense of who she is, her own person, her own channel. It's something she's never had in her whole life. And we realized that's all because of my dad. She realizes it. So in the end, now she is, and I am much better at what we do, and we handle it because social media kind of helped us get there, and it's more for her than for me. But now, she's appreciative for what that man has done and given her, and it's just made the process that much easier.
It's because of your dad, but it's also because that decision that you made not to take that video down. You can't just show the fun side, the shiny side, the happy times. If you're going to show people real life, you got to show them real life. People ask me, why do you come on and you're crying and you're talking about the things that going on in your life that are negative when you do all this other type of content? That's not, because I'm trying to show you guys that it's not all. Yeah, I got a couple of businesses and I retired early and life's fucking great and I'm going to Jamaica. Yeehaw. It's not all that. And when you're talking about caregiving, if you don't show all of it, then the people out there that have never gone through it aren't going to understand what all of it are about. And the people out there that are going through it or have gone through it, they're going to identify with it immediately. And they're going to be like, yeah, this dude's showing you all of it. He's showing you the times that he's sitting down at the kitchen table with his old man and they're laughing and they're reminiscing. And he's showing you the times that he's got to be out there stopping his old man from driving away in a car, no matter how badly he's got to yell at him. And yeah, it's that rawness that I think the realness that people identify with. And that's what your account is real.
It's real, A, because I don't know how not to be real, and B, I've reached the point in my life, what I did practicing criminal law. I've seen the worst of humanity, right? And I've been in prisons. I've seen the worst. I've seen faults, and then I've also seen, in the non-criminal side, everybody has faults. Some of them, are worse than others, but everybody is imperfect, and they're going to be, even if they're perfect, they're going to have imperfect moments. Sorry about that. Somebody called in. I put on do not disturb, but I forgot what I was saying. What was I talking about?
It's okay. Let me ask you another question. The kids. How did it affect the kids? How did the kids take it? Because I had, when my father moved in, so you talk about the craziness in the beginning. My stepmother passed away the last day of August. And my father moved in with us the next day. Now, he moved in, we had a 3-bedroom ranch. My wife was pregnant with our 3rd child. We didn't have enough bedrooms, and my father moved in with us. And my son, our 3rd child, was born on December 1st. My father came in and said, "Here, I'm going to give you some money. Do what you got to do to the house to make room." It was a tremendous help. He goes, "It's your inheritance anyway. Why wait until I die to get it? And I need a place to live. I can't live in that house anymore." So we converted our garage into a master and an additional bedroom, and we did some work down here to make room for everybody. But, that construction went on while my wife was pregnant with our 3rd child, and my sick father is now living with us out of the blue. And then my son is born December 1st, and 3 or 4 days before Christmas, the company I was working for went under and closed their doors.
Oh, my God.
I had worked for a landscape company for 10 years. I decided to switch because I hadn't gotten a raise in 8 years. I decided to change companies to a company paying me $18,000 a year more, very much closer to home. I worked there for 8 months, and then they went under. And so I'm at home with my dad, my newborn son, no job, not knowing what the hell I'm going to do. And my dad, my wife looks at me and says, "You've been doing landscaping for 20 years. Why don't you start your own business?" And my dad goes, "Yeah, you got some money, and I'll throw some in, and I'll help you out." And so I started my own landscape company. That was going into 20. My dad moved in the end of 2011. My dad started the landscape company spring of 2012, and it was the worst drought in the Chicagoland area in 87 years. So that first year was insane. And it was like my wife's like, "Oh my God, I got my father-in-law living in the house. I got a newborn. My husband's driving past lawns he should be mowing. He's making $0. We were bouncing off the walls." And it had an effect on my kids. My kids were seeing things that they had never seen before. My two daughters were now sharing a room. Pop is living in the house. How did your kids take it?
Well, that's a great question. Geez, our stories sound so similar. Um, and funny you mentioned the financial area of it. So with regard to my dad moving in, that did not really affect my kids that much. They were really great with my dad and still are. They're amazing with him. But the other part that I touched on earlier, that's when I stopped working and, you're not bringing in the money that you were bringing in before, and your kids are accustomed to a certain lifestyle, whatever it is, and I had to, I'm telling Danielle, your wife's also accustomed to a certain lifestyle. And I'm saying, look, guys, I don't know what the future is going to bring. This is long before social media. I just simply can't do that lifestyle anymore. And the stress of the law, because it's inconsistent with, me living another 10 years. Okay. I knew if I didn't get out that I'm going to slide right back in, because you can't help it. I mean, there's stresses, and when you're dealing with that kind of stress, it's going to slide you right back in. And for me, especially as an empathetic man, as an attorney, I kind of lived with my clients and, experienced what they're experiencing. I couldn't come home and turn it off. So for me, it was really important to move out into something that was less stressful. I didn't even care if I was mowing lawns, whatever the hell it was, especially, if I could get exercise. I didn't care what I did, but I knew that I had to do something else. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to earn that kind of money doing whatever else it was that I was going to be doing. And that did impact the kids. Not, that they were, they weren't coming and bitching at me or making me feel bad, but I could hear, like Danielle having to say, "Look, guys, you have to make better decisions about money. Money doesn't grow on trees. We don't know where we're going to be. We have to retire." And I tried to pay off all my bills, but it did definitely, the financial part of it affected them more than anything else. Now, thankfully, I had put away their college money, so that nothing really impacted them that way. It was the smaller things, like let's go to. I want to take a trip to Cabo San Lucas. Well, sorry, I'm not gonna. I can't send you to Cabo San Lucas, and I can't just give you $2,000 to go to Cabo San Lucas. You can't buy the $900 end of the year Christmas present or what. You have to be satisfied with $150. Those kind of things. And I'm fine with it. I don't need that stuff anymore. But they weren't there with me. I was the one sitting in the hospital bed, right? I could see, okay, new car, I can walk and enjoy my life. Which one is really important? And to me, that was an obvious answer, but it took a little bit of movement for them. And then again, everything seemed to work out. My dad moves in, freaking social media blows up and provides other opportunities that were never there before. So
what did you wind up moving into, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I'm social media, Tom. We're doing
No. So initially, when you left the law, you went right into social media?
Oh, well, no, I did not. I continued to practice, and I still have office with the secretary today. I'm just, really not taking on new cases, kind of working through the old cases. The only new cases I've taken since then are old clients, people that I know that are, it's going to be less. I know that's not going to be a stressful situation. And I slowly, I was still had my practice that I was working through. It's just been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking since my heart attack. So it's kind of, it kind of was a pretty seamless transition. So, as the more it dried up in law, the more it was opening up in social media, and then the ability to do, advertising and other things, really kind of stepped in and filled that void. So we were lucky, and I owe it all to my dad too. I mean, it's just amazing how the sacrifice that we made ended up, being one of the greatest gifts that he's ever given us.
Usually when I do these interviews with people, because all of the people that I've interviewed so far have been people that I have had the opportunity to meet via TikTok, interesting people that I just really wanted to have a conversation with. So I've been ending all of the interviews with something that you're touching on, and this is not the end of the interview, but I'm going to go ahead and do the last question now. The last question is always, how has TikTok changed your life? Now, you have alluded to that, it is really, what projects do you have coming up? How has TikTok changed so that you and your wife can fully transition into content creation full time?
Well, that has been TikTok. I mean, as the followers grew, right? I mean, we have a situation where, most of the followers we have, upwards of 70% came here because of my dad, right? I can tell where they, what videos they came on, as opposed to the poems or the other stuff we've done. But we've been doing it long enough that now I can post a poem, and not even a good poem, Tom. I can post a poem and it's going to get 150,000 views, which is a lot less than my dad's videos might get. But it's a hell of a lot for a poem. And for me, I'm thrilled with it. So we may not necessarily command the same numbers without my father's involvement and the familiarity of his face. And of course, his amazing lines that he comes up with in the videos. But we've developed enough of a personal following that I think we can eke out a living if we have to. And I've been able to do some advertising. I don't know if you saw my videos, but they're quite different,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Tom, I fell, what I really always wanted to be wasn't a lawyer. I wanted to be a writer. That's what I always wanted to do. I wanted to write, hence the poems, and I started out with poems. But then as we got into TikTok, this is something that I never thought I would be doing. I started writing ads and, trying to be comedic ads. And if you've seen the ones for Manscaped, I write them and then we film them and produce those ads. And I've fallen in love with that process. And so it's actually, I'm motivated now to write more and create more of that content for people, and I wouldn't have had that opportunity without my dad's help in growing the TikTok account, which is driving YouTube and drives Instagram, which are all growing as well. But it's from the TikTok people, really. And it's, for me, it's been a miracle. I mean, literally, you see, the timing was perfect. My dad gave me this great audience, and now I'm able to do what I really love to do, which is write, produce, film, edit, and put a video on. Like, we did an ad. I think it's got on TikTok, it's got 900,000 views. It's a freaking ad, but it's a comedic ad. So, I'm trying to get to the point where I can produce a video that's an advertisement, but that it looks like my real content, or is my real content, because it's me, and that people will start to look forward to advertisements, right? To actually watch them. And the analogy, like you watch the Super Bowl because there's always going to be fun ads on, right? That's kind of what I'm going for. And slowly we're getting there. But again, it all rolls back to the platform that my dad gave us. So TikTok has definitely changed my life. I mean, not just that, it's, things like getting to go to Washington, D.C. and meet the CEO and, and testify before Congress people, not testify, but talk to Congress people before they hear. And, some stuff I've done with the Alzheimer's Association. They invited me to come to their their thing in New Orleans, the annual thing. They're gonna would put me up. I don't know if I gonna have time to do it, but it has changed in so many ways. And aside from maybe getting recognized on the street, just there's so many differences in me before TikTok and after TikTok, and all for the better, and all thanks to my dad. So it's just been a whirlwind. The whole social media thing has been a whirlwind, and it's opening up opportunities that are allowing me to chase dreams that I gave up when I was a kid. You got to go to law, you got to be an accountant, be a doctor, be a lawyer. That into, and that's what I did, and now I'm able to actually pursue things that I really enjoy. And it's a whole new experience for me, Tom. So for me, it's been an absolute godsend.
Yeah, it's amazing the organic growth that happens on TikTok. It's amazing how video content versus written content, like on Facebook or Twitter or whatnot, it just attracts people so much more. I say it all the time. I told my wife. My wife is the one that suggested I got on TikTok. She's like, you should try that. You should just try a channel. I'm like, I got a face for radio. You don't do videos when you look at. She's like, try it. And I said, I didn't think I was going to have 1,000 followers on this app. And one day I'm driving in my car. I was heading into the next town to do some shopping, and I made a video. The phone's on a dash mount, and I made a video talking about how if one more person tells me that I need to do my own research, I'm going to lose my fucking shit. I talked about how my eye was twitching, and for like a week, I couldn't pronounce anything with the letter R in it. And overnight, the TikTok had like 18,000 views. And over the course of the following week from that I put on like 150,000 followers. And I was like, holy shit, where don't you people come from? And then it just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. And then I'm talking to people and in these podcasts that I'm doing, in a couple of months, I'm going to be talking to a flight commander at NASA who spent 6 months on the space shuttle, on the space station, because he follows my content and he digs me. I got an autographed picture of him on the walls calling me the greatest modern day philosopher he's ever known. I'm like, dude, you are like smart on a level that I couldn't fit into my head. I dug ditches for a living. I was a landscaper. So the fact that I'm an extreme extrovert. I talk to people in line at the grocery store. I'll talk to people at the next gas pump. I just like talking to people. And so the fact that I can now, because of an audience that was built up from me just running my mouth, I can now have an opportunity to interview people and just have conversations with people that I think are interesting. And people are going to go, man, I got to go see that. It blows my mind. I'm like, what? You're coming to see me? A high school dropout retired landscaper? What do you know? Oh, I fucking love your content. Or people running in the streets. My wife and I went to see Kathleen Madigan in the city in Chicago, and we were walking down the street, and there was a couple of guys having a dinner out on a sidewalk cafe, and the guy, as we walked past, the guy goes, TikTok, man, I love your TikToks. I'm like, it's nuts to me. It's absolutely nuts how it just blew up.
Tom, you
raved into your phone.
I again, like I said before we got on, I was watching you long before I ever even started posting on TikTok because, dude, what you said to me, your channel's real, right back at you. People enjoy honesty and sincerity, regardless of what you're saying. Nobody thinks you're pushing an agenda or have any ulterior motives. You are just spewing you. And that's an attractive thing to find on social media, because so much of social media is polished and fake and scripted, and you can see it, when that happens. And there are certain content creators that are amazingly real. And I think, a lot of caregivers fall into that category. There's other people, some people that have gotten off TikTok that I thought were amazing. But, another, Bay is a girl with Tourette's, right? And she's just killing it. She's got 10 million following her. She started from nothing. But why does her channel blow up? Because she's real. She doesn't bullshit. She's not fake in any way, shape, or form. And you have that gift as well, Tom. That's why your channel, people enjoy watching you. What's Tom got to say today? I may agree, I may not agree with him, but I know I'm going to get his real stuff. I know I'm not going to be hit with a bunch of, word, catchphrases or,
Yeah.
news quotes I'm going to get is, you don't rebroadcast the daily news. You rebroadcast your perception of the world. And it's interesting. And I think it's valuable. And that's why people are flocking to you.
I appreciate that sincerely. I get asked. So, I mean, I'm sure you've noticed there are days where I'll put out 30, 40 videos and people go, how much time do you put into this? I mean, how much time is it? I said, I don't know how to create videos. I have a stand on my desk. I put my phone in the stand and I hit record and I speak. And when I'm done speaking, I hit post. The only thing I do is I add the automated the subtitles or whatever on the screen. I don't know how to do all of this. I am 51 years old. I was born in 1972. I came up in the 80s. I am technologically ignorant. I can barely put the intro and the outro to my podcast together after I have the goddamn audio. I hit record and I speak. So when you ask me how much time it takes me to make 30 videos, hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah. No, Tom, I'm with you because, that's the beauty of what we do as opposed to, like when I make an ad or we do a skit, man, that takes a lot of freaking time and effort and different takes, and it is a process. But we are lucky, and that's what most content creators have to do. They plan out a video. We are lucky that half the time if I'm looking for a video to post, I try and post one video a day, and that's time consuming enough. But if I can't find like a video of my dad that's appropriate, and a lot of times I'm not going to put that. The video I took today, I look at it and I go, I just don't like the way he looks in it, or I don't like what he said. And instead of going back and trying to find some old video, I'll just walk outside and just do a commentary, people ask this question and just post it, and it takes 3 minutes and that's it. It's done. That's very different to the scripted and the written ones. That's hard, Tom. It's hard to do and time consuming. What we do very quickly, it's not only honest, real, but it fits. You can fit it in with your day. You can just post it. And I think people appreciate that.
I like some of that. I like the transition videos where people are tossing their hat around the room and then they wind up on the bed. I think they're interesting. It takes a lot of talent to do that. It's just not my thing. And people, when I tell people that I make videos just speaking into the phone what's on my mind, it is quite literally just I get a comment, I go, okay, let me reply to this comment, and I'll hit record, and then I'll give my 2 cents, and they'll say, well, how often do you go back over and just edit it out, or you say, I might be in the middle of making a video and I'll get a phone call or something, or I'll burp and I'm like, that can't be in the video, and I'll redo it. But no, if I can't get it out, so my free podcast, I always say at the beginning of my podcast, I say, this is meant to be like, this is not a finished podcast. It's not done in a studio. It's meant to be like two people sitting on the deck shooting the shit. And that's what I want it to be like. I want it to be like as if you were sitting right here in a chair next to me in the office and we were just bullshitting about whatever subject we were bullshitting about. And for that, I don't need to sugarcoat it. I don't need to polish it. I don't need the proper lighting and all of that shit. And, I don't know. I understand it. And then there's always the people that think that you're getting $1 million from, well, you do so many TikTok, you've got such a large following, you must be getting paid to do this. Man, I'm getting paid jack shit to do this. I do this because I like doing this.
Right. And I'll dispel that rumor. There are other apps that pay better than TikTok, but TikTok is my primary app, and I get a lot of views. I mean, in the month it's millions, and they do not pay much at all. I mean, it's nothing that I could live off of or what have you. So all this entire TikTok is for the love of it. I love reaching that many people and getting that much response. I love being able to get on a live and talk to 2,000 people at one time. Those are things you can't necessarily do on the other apps, although they're getting there. TikTok is kind of a special special app. It really is. I don't know exactly what is going on behind the scenes, but the way it's worked and the way, like you talked about organic growth, it doesn't happen on any of the other apps. Most of the growth that I have in the other apps, I know are people migrating over from TikTok. So it's wonderful. And like you say, no one's on here for the money. And if they are, you can sniff them out, right? I mean, you know, and if you like them, you watch them anyway. If you don't, you don't. But no, we're not here on TikTok for the money. I'm not spending this hour with you for the money. I'm spending it because I've watched you and I wanted to talk to you. You know, I see you on TikTok for so many years, and I knew it would be a great conversation. I wanted to hear what you had to say. I'm on here for that. And that's rewarding in and of itself. You know, it doesn't always have to be monetary. The money, great. You know, if I get a nice big ad or something, that's all wonderful. But we're not here for that. And that's not what brought us here in the first place. We're here because we got something to say, something to share, and this is the best place to do it.
Dan, like I said earlier, I sincerely, it's not hyperbole. I absolutely adore your content. I view your father as like my own father. We've gotten to know your family. Your page is as real as it gets. Your wife is fantastic. I hope you never stop doing what you're doing, because I love it. I go to watch it as often as I possibly can. When you guys are on a live, I'll sneak in and I'll hear what you guys have to say. And I too have a wife. You've seen some of our lives, what my wife does live with me. She doesn't do content like your wife does, and she doesn't do lives, but I too have a wife that can take over a live.
I've seen.
Yes, and as your wife can, and I love it when she does, when you two are sitting down and you're talking. And I can't thank you enough for doing this, man. It was a great conversation. I really, if you're ever in Chicago, you got to let me know, man.
Absolutely. I absolutely will, Tom. And everything you just said right back at you. And I will tell you, it's not just me. My brother, you know, my brother Mark watches you as well. And he's let me know, because oftentimes I don't see comments on the live, but you have commented, and I didn't learn about it till the next day when my brother tells me, hey, yeah, I go, yeah, I didn't see it, but he loves your content as well. So you're popular in the Salinger family.
Well, thank you very much. Say hi to your brother, say hi to your wife, and say hi to your dad from everybody here, man. Have a very Merry Christmas, man.
And Tom, you too. Merry Christmas, and same to your wife as well.
Thank you very much, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
You got it, Tom. All right.
Bye.